This is an Abunden Insight. Today, we're talking with Scott Geller of Capitus Advisors. He's a fractional CFO. He's got a really interesting company that he's been working with. Welcome, Scott. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So you've got an interesting client situation that we're going to address today. And so how did you get introduced, or how did you meet this client?
Sure. So it was actually one of my first clients after kind of hanging my own shingle, if you will, as a fractional CFO, and reaching out to doing the network rounds. And these are two individuals, the founders. There's two founders, and these individuals I actually worked with them in a previous life, if you will, the previous company I was with. And they had gone out and started up a digital ticketing platform in the high school and a little bit kind of middle school and somewhat college athletics space. So reached out to them. If anything, we consider each other friends before they left on their journey. And since I was entering a new one, reached out to them just to catch up. And this is kind of in the beginning, very, very beginning of COVID. And as part of COVID, their business started exploding.
Okay.
And within that explosion, they realized, we have some needs that we just don't have the skills for in-house. And so they reached back out to me a few months later and said, Scott, can we talk about what you can help us for as a fractional CFO? So that was kind of how it came about of starting to work with them.
Great. So, so fractional CFO obviously can deal with, anything from accounting to financial analysis to, supporting fundraising to systems. So there's, my experience of a number of different things, fractional CFO can do. What was some of the, challenges that they were particularly looking for help with?
Sure. So initially what they were needing was to go down the funding path. So they decided they wanted to raise money. They had talked about it in the past, spent a little bit of time, but hadn't really gone through the full process. So they needed somebody to come in and help them with that process. So, they need a financial model. They need to know who they should talk to, how to contact some of these investors. There's the administrative side of it, which is never terribly interesting and fun, but you have to build up a data room. You have to know what to put in there, kind of help organize the back office or the organization. So you have all these documents, all the information and the data that investors are looking for, as well as helping with the correspondence. As a growing, kind of a late startup age for them, they didn't have a lot of free time. They were busy working in the business, so they needed somebody to come work on the business and help them just manage the process of corresponding with investors. And then really understanding how much money do we need? Do we need 400,000? Do we need 5 million? Where in that frame do we need to be sitting? And as well as kind of the timing on when do you take this funding, decisions on how to spend the money. It's common with across a couple of clients that I've seen, and out there with a lot of startups. But they were hitting that stride of needing somebody to come in and help them with that challenge.
Right. Great. So they brought you in and you started doing all the fun, projections and historical numbers and putting together some kind of presentation. And in terms of, the company, the funding supports the company. So they had visions of growing the company pretty significantly. Is that fair assessment?
It is, yes. They'd grown, over 2 times from the previous year in revenue. They were on track of growing another 2 times in the year that I was working with them. And in their business, COVID was actually pushing these schools to be able to handle capacity within their facilities for events. They couldn't take cash anymore, a lot of them, so they had to have a digital ticketing option. So they were, their business was exploding. They were having schools coming to them, clients coming to them to sign up. So they were seeing the growth, and they really wanted to capture and expand on that, and really leverage the situation they were in, to continue growing 2 times plus in revenue and client size.
Mhm. Great. So one of the things that an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur I know, who's always said is every time you double your business, everything breaks.
Absolutely true. Yes, I don't think I've heard it in that way, but it's absolutely true, and that was what was happening as well.
Yeah. So that holds true for like computer systems. We outgrow the computer systems. It holds true for processes. I used to tell Susie when we got a new account. Now Susie's job's been split in half. So, I forgot to tell, Mark, whoever Susie's other half is, and oh man, it blew up. So, those are some of the things that I've seen. What were some of the things you saw in this situation?
Sure, and as the relationship continued, it did expand from purely fundraising to a more retainer relationship, so an ongoing, more than just kind of a project, and rolled into a retainer where I was working with them on a set focus over now over almost 2 years now, and so as it started expanding, I started understanding the business a little bit more.
Okay.
Understanding where some of the pain points are. To your point of, their transaction processor, what's happening there? Okay, let me help you guys migrate to a new one. On the IT side, they had a build that they needed. They had several band-aids, if you will, on the system, so they needed to start working through that and fixing those and adding facets and aspects to their business that they need to their platform they needed. So helping them find vendors for that and understanding what they need to do there. And the other side was that they were hiring. They were profitable, which was great. So they were reinvesting that money back in the organization. And as part of that, working with I mentioned there's 2 founders, one on the sales side and one on kind of everything else. So CEO, CTO, COO, head of account management, you name it. He was kind of handling everything, and working with him to realize he's at the stage that, and they had, they're becoming profitable. So it's time to reinvest some of that money back into people, and understanding who to bring on and how to get him out of the not mundane, but the minute details, day-to-day tasks that you need to hire people for. And that was probably one of the biggest issues they had was figuring out how to do that.
Right. Yeah. Hiring people's big challenge. And it kind of fits in, it's got to fit into the whole company in terms of just being a fit to communicate well and understand where the company's going. Now, in the course of fundraising, a lot of times you're kind of looking at long-term goals, right? So did they have some sort of plan? We want to grow and sell in so many years, something, and then kind of stepping that back to what do we need to do in 3 years to get to that longer plan? They have something like that?
Yes. And now, kind of putting that together for them, not only in the strategic aspect, but quantifying what does that mean? So, given the growth they're seeing and projecting that out over the next, year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, although 5 years is nice to look at and think about, but who knows what's going to happen in 5 years, really. Um, but it's, yeah. So it's okay. If you're going to reach that point, if you're going to reach 5 million and then 20 million in revenue, and then, maybe 50 million in revenue in that 5 year or 4 year time frame, what do you need as part of an organization? And it's not just what do you need to build out as platform and capabilities. It's what do you need to as you transition into kind of this real business, if you will. And a lot of times I think that's kind of the ultimate challenge of business, and particularly this client. And it's okay, what do you need to become a self-managing organization? Because one or two founders can't run an entire organization when you get beyond a couple $1 million. It's just kind of destined to fail, in my opinion. So it's, how do they surrender control? How do they hire the right people? And then helping them understand, do you need a chief of operations, or maybe you need a project manager today, and tomorrow you need that chief of operations. But it's very important to think about, okay, these are the people, these are the roles I need to hire, and then handing that responsibility off to them and letting them actually run with those tasks and responsibilities that you need them to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the tools that I find helpful in having some of those discussions is just an org chart. It's a pretty basic tool, but did you have some org charts to kind of say, okay, this is where we're at, and maybe this is what it might look like as we're, starting to add people? Did you tend to go into that?
We did, and we kind of did a little bit differently. Now that you mentioned kind of putting together, sometimes it's nice to see it, right? You see that actual org chart today, and then you see what it looks like tomorrow. And to your point, we never really got to that point of actually truly putting down details on paper in a picture wise. Like, we had it kind of in a financial model, and we're talking about the number of people that we need and the timing for that. But to your point, that's a really good to make sure that you take that step in. Okay, this is truly what it looks like, and this is who's from the top to bottom. This is the org chart. But so we kind of thought through workflows of how the company was going to look. So yes and no, I guess I would say.
Right. And well, in my experience, everybody understands org charts. No mystery there. But, so often the tools to make the org chart make it really a headache, and that's probably most often reason why org charts aren't kept up to date, or we don't make them for projections. It's like, man, I spend a huge amount of time, doing that. And it's like, now if you have, of course, Abunden, we like our drag and drop org charts. So that's, we try and make it easier. But yeah, it's a headache to do most of the time if you're doing it on a spreadsheet or something like that.
It is, and I've over the years I've done it in let's see, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, what's the Visio, you name, on paper and scanning them, you name it. So yes, at the time, having the capability of doing kind of a drag and drop would have been great, and probably would have helped us down that path, and because to your point, it just takes so much time, and time is so valuable, and people just don't have enough of it.
Absolutely. That's right. Now, so in hiring, one of the first questions is, okay, that every one of those hires is kind of a decision. Do we have the cash flow? How bad do we need it? What's the revenue opportunity? And, and that's one of many management decisions. Now with the group, growing this quickly, what was were there management meetings? How did that kind of take place?
Sure. And previously, again, since it was a smaller team, it was kind of an ad hoc, or the CEO or founder had one-on-ones with everybody. And I kind of worked with him to help him understand, okay, we need to pull the management team together. Even if it's every other week, we've got to pull them together, and the meeting needs to be organized. You can't have, everyone's tired of having meetings, but there are purposes. There are purpose and value in having some. And so we started off with just putting something on the calendar. Just keep it easy, keep it simple. And also what I started pushing was we need to start thinking about dashboards. And we need to start putting together KPIs. And at first it's okay, let's keep it simple. Let's keep some, kind of find that first success, because once you kind of find something that works, it helps generate additional successes down the road, I've found. But you need to start measuring. You need to start measuring what's happening with the clients. You need to start measuring what's happening on the revenue side. What does the pipeline look like? And because that's going to flow through everything, as well as what's happening on the operational side. And I get that putting these together can be intimidating, and it can be difficult, almost overwhelming, knowing where do I start, right? So I started on the finance side. I said, look, this is the information I have. Let me just start explaining, where is our revenue coming from, by states, by client groupings. What does it look like, kind of on a monthly and maybe weekly, if we can kind of get to that kind of data. And just sharing that information, and then saying, okay, what can we take from this, and what kind of decisions can we make off of it? And that's where we started with these meetings and kind of building out the dashboards.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. Yeah, Abundance absolutely encourages that as part of our management meeting structure. So we 100% with you on that. So that worked out. Was there kind of some initial resistance to that, or how did that interpersonally work?
Yeah, and I've gone through this, multiple different companies, kind of getting that dashboard, and I wouldn't say there was any kind of resistance. It was more of the unknown, and where do we go? Like, how do I do this? And having an actual system probably could have been helpful at the time, but really just kind of putting information in front of people and just putting out kind of finding these small wins. Okay, well, do we know why? And with our company, it was very kind of state heavy. So there are certain states that we had a lot of schools, and during the time, there are certain states, Florida, Texas, right? Huge high school athletic programs there, and making sure people understood, well, this month Texas fell by 10%, or this month Florida, or our third highest state went from, let's say, Indiana to North Carolina. And why did that happen? And nobody had really started asking those questions and pushing in to start, one, kind of looking at this. Nobody really had time to put it together, and two, kind of pushing people to start thinking about the whys, why things are happening, how they were going, how they're happening, then what can we do about that to make a difference? So instead of allowing, say Texas to drop 10%, okay, let's get our account managers out there and talking to some of our top schools to make sure maybe it's just the seasonality of the business. Maybe it's COVID making an impact on it. Maybe we just have schools that are pulling back from our services, but we need to understand what those reasons are. And it was kind of pushing the leaders to push down and delegate this information and data to their teams so they can start taking actions and being a little more proactive about what was happening within the organization.
Right. Yeah, I think, to what I'm hearing is my experience is, the idea of a dashboard, kind of makes sense to people, but they really, unless you built some of them before, you really need some help, it's a little guidance to put it in place. It's not like, oh, I don't want to do that. It's like, I'm busy and, I've never done this before. I need somebody to help me. And, and rather than just say, here's boom, all your dashboard and it's done. It's like, it's a process. Let's start with, 2 or 3 metrics and kind of start tracking those KPIs and then say, okay, what else and what else? And then, all of a sudden, a couple months down the line, you're like, wow, we've got a nice set of metrics that, some of them are kind of, backward looking, some are kind of more forward looking, some are in sales, some are in operations, some are in finance. And now you're like, oh, okay, man, this is a great dashboard. Thanks for putting that together.
Absolutely. There's also times where you realize that something that you put on that dashboard, you don't need it, right? Or it's not valuable. It doesn't make sense within this business. Maybe in another business it does, or maybe another time it does. I think there's times where you need to be open to maybe you've grown beyond a certain metric or a KPI as an organization, and based on what the company's goals are, those metrics and KPIs change and are completely different. And I've definitely seen that as well. It's kind of it kind of feeds itself a little bit, where you use these metrics and KPIs to help build out your strategic goals and vision. But then those goals and vision also drive what metrics, and also maybe it's not just you're losing some, but maybe you're just reprioritizing as well. And I think that's important, is to understand, look, just because it's on the page, as we know, it doesn't always has to be on the page. Or dashboard or whatever. Maybe you have a system that you can kind of look at and share with management team.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, especially like you're talking about a company that's, doubling every year. Wow. Things are changing. The dashboard's probably going to change too.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. Another thing that tends to change is processes. Did you get involved with, any of the kind of process? I'm sure there's some that you're involved with, but in helping the company, did they have written documentation early on? I assume most companies, when they're, pretty small, really don't tend to have much. But as they get bigger and bigger and add more people, it tends to move that way. What did you see in this case?
Yes, absolutely. To your point is, most startups, they're busy trying to create a company. They're not busy trying to create processes or put much on paper, because they're not really sure what to put on paper, if you will. So yes, I mean, in the accounting area, particularly, they had a bookkeeper, but I brought in more of a CPA, kind of a part-time CPA, to help us, one, transition systems. The system we were using, really wasn't fitting with what we needed. So we changed over to QuickBooks Online, which is not perfect, but it works well enough. So there's a process to go through a system migration, which is never terribly easy. We also went from cash accounting to accrual accounting. So there's a lot of processes to put in place there, and helping them map that out. There's, the other process that I recommend to everybody pretty much as soon as I come in any company, is, what is your payroll process? Who performs your payroll? And is it on paper? So that if Julie, who's running your payroll right now, all of a sudden is, completely, gets sick or wins the lottery and decides she's not coming back tomorrow, that Sarah can step in and knows how to do it, or maybe John can step in and you do that. And that, because to me, payroll is one of the most important aspects of a company that you have to get right. So yes, there are definitely several kind of in the accounting area, and then helping them out a little bit, in other areas of they had kind of credit card processing, so helping them a little bit there, and They're kind of going through a migration, so helping them on that side, as well as a little bit on the sales side of, okay, what is a CRM that you're using? What kind of data can we get out of it? What kind of data is going into it? And how is that rolling into the company platform? And then how does that roll into the sales compensation and helping them put together the sales structure, the actual sales compensation, sales commission structure or compensation package, if you will. So yeah, it was kind of stepping in wherever I thought they might need a little help. But yeah, to your point is, as these companies grow, they have to start putting process together and even thinking about some of the controls that need to be in place in those processes.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I also liked your point that, a process isn't, payroll in particular, it's not real valuable if the people that need it, when the regular person's out, it has to be accessible. If you can't find the process, nobody's going to use it.
No.
So, that's something at Abunden we're really very, definitely focused on. So that's cool. It's cool. And were there kind of other kind of organizational management issues that you ran into in the process of this?
I think it's in my role. I try to be a fractional executive as well. Not just these are the finances. Try to understand and assist across the organization. So whether that means it needs someone to help them with, say, negotiation with vendors, which are definitely, I step in, and especially kind of going through finding a software development firm that works the way we want it to and provides a value that we feel is there, and dealing with some of those hard conversations. And just kind of pushing back a little bit and asking certain questions to make sure that they're thinking about, if they're making a hire, what type of hire do they need to make, or if they're structuring the organization for who needs to be in the leadership, kind of asking some of the questions around the highs and the whys of just kind of challenging to make sure they're making the right decision today. So that's, I don't know if there's any major management issues. Probably the biggest was forcing this founder to start handing responsibilities off.
Right. Yeah, we actually kind of have a name for that. It's we call it the founder's dilemma. You've got the most experience, you've been touching everything, it's a risk to let go and delegate. Mm-hmm. You're worried about losing clients, losing employees. So many things can go wrong. If I do it, I know it'll be done right. And and when you're real small, that's cool. But you get to a certain point, and now it's holding your growth back. But the challenge is, how do I feel safe doing it? And so for us, it's about, having that plan so everybody knows where we're going, having that org chart so everybody knows where they fit in. And, we've got the processes so people know, what steps they do, and we have training, and putting all that around that CEO is the way to make it safer for them to let go. But that's a big challenge for pretty much any founder.
It is, and I think you laid out nicely, some of the ways to attack this and approach it. And what I think a lot of founders don't realize is that it's not only a challenge to growth, but it's a challenge to the value of the organization, of the business. Because if they're looking to turn this over, or they're looking to sell, or even step away from it. If the founder or one or two people are so minutely involved in the organization that they can't leave for a week or two, even 2, maybe 3 weeks, then a buyer is going to look at that and say, what am I buying? Am I buying the CEO or am I buying the company? Because if and that's going to impact the value they get out of the organization. 100%. It's one of the, I don't want to say it's the biggest, but it's a definite driver in the value of your company when you go to sell it. And it could be a difference of selling it for 2 to 4 times, multiple, or 4 to 6 multiple. To show that you can leave this business, go on vacation for 2 weeks, and it still rolls forward. It's still growing. It's still profitable. You're not losing clients. The operational side isn't falling apart. The sales team knows what they're doing, knows who they need to sign. Then when they go to sell it, it's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something people don't really necessarily realize until they get to the point of, well, I actually need to sell this. And then, in some cases, it's almost too late, or, it's certainly going to delay your sale if you want to get full value for your company. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah, it is. And most of the time people don't, to your point, they don't think about that until it's too late. And then it's too late to make that change as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, this sounds like a really interesting company. How did things turn out for them? Did they grow a whole bunch? And,
They did. They are on their way to. They were about a little shy of 2 million in revenue, and their fiscal year. Their fiscal year isn't exactly around the calendar year. Their previous fiscal year. In this fiscal year, we're looking at something between 4.5 and 5 million in revenue. Going from probably finished last fiscal year around 400 to 500 clients, in the 1,000+ range right now.
Wow.
Yes, it got 20, grew to close to 20 people now, close to looking at probably being close to 30 people by the end of the fiscal year. And we ended up deciding, when we went through the fundraising process, the valuation just didn't make sense at the time. Mm-hmm. It was still relatively early in the COVID, and what that impact was going to be on holding inside events, even outside events, was still relatively unknown. So the valuations weren't really there, and that made sense. So it's time to kind of revisit that path and to say, okay, look, we've proven high school athletics are still exist. There's other avenues of other markets this business can push into, and throwing some of those numbers out there, you can see that they've proven that it's growing, and we're profitable. So we're going to go back down the fundraising process, and so I'll be again going back to that process to help them identify or kind of return to some of the investors that we talked to before, maybe identify some other new ones that we're looking at, as well as looking at a few debt options. And there's a lot, there's more debt options out there in the market now for kind of that startup or in very young stage of companies, and then there have been in the past. So it's assessing which one works best for the organization, and continuing to help them grow.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a great success story and a really interesting company to work with. I hope all your engagements are as successful and engaging, if you will.
Thanks. Yeah, they most of them are doing well through COVID. Thankfully, I haven't had to ramp any clients or for me or companies down because of COVID, and it's been a very interesting, challenging, but also kind of exciting period in my role, at least.
Fantastic. Well, great. Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us today and sharing your abundant insights to us as well. So,
Yeah, thanks, Carl. I enjoyed it, and it was fun to talk through how the kind of some of those needs kind of lined up with Abundant a bit at a time, and yeah, enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thanks. This has been an Abundant Insight. Please follow us on social media like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or visit our website at www.abundant.com.